Hi, I'm John Kratky. I am the writer of projects released under Coffee Time Comics, which include The Long Death, Home Free, and Getting Back to Normal. You can find me at coffeetimecomics.com or at Coffee Time Comics on Twitter or Instagram. And you're watching and listening to Two Geeks Talking.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Two Geeks Talking is an entertainment industry interview show where we interview the creative people from the comic, film, TV, movie, and video game industries. And of course, I'm your host, Kurt Sasso. We are joined today by a returning guest. He's been on the show before with his amazing, talented artist, Michelle, for this comic series called Home Free. He is here today talking about his brand new horror-based comic called The Long Death. We're joined by John Kratky. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm great, man. Thanks for having me on.
It's been a while since you were last on the show. This was a spur of the moment interview. So
Right.
from what I've seen from your amazing Kickstarter campaign, it looks like a fun, colorful, to a certain extent, horror comic. Amazing characters, very graphic in some cases, but it looks beautiful either way. For those that don't know anything about yourself as a creative person, tell us who you are and what you're bringing to the show today.
So yeah, I'm John Kratky. I work under Coffee Time Comics. That's what I release all my work under. Mostly what I've been doing over the past few years is crime comics on Kickstarter. I've been making comics for almost 20 years. I started out doing web comics. So I kind of had a mixture of different things like slice of life. I started doing crime over there. Then I started getting into like a more fantasy comic, and I did some early horror stuff over there. That's where I did The Goblet at the Black Oak, which I finally put into print and have released with the Long Death campaign. Past few years, I've been mostly doing crime novellas, my story Home Free, and I did another graphic novel called Getting Back to Normal. Now I'm trying to shift gears a little bit, even though I will be doing more crime, especially with Michelle Lodge. We will embark on a new project next year. But The Long Death is my introduction to horror for everyone who hasn't read horror from me before. I'm very excited to kind of make the shift and start diving into both worlds and having different Kickstarters for different crowds out there.
I've always known you're a very talented creative person because when you were last on, you kind of dove into a few different genres you were talking about. The Home Free itself was just an amazing comic in its own right, and I love the fact that you're going to the horror genre is great to see. When it comes to the horror genre, what is the most misunderstood concept, especially when it comes to comics and horror?
I would say, when it comes to the bloodier stuff, I think the misconception is that it's just always grueling or just supposed to be there to shock. I think as horror fans, when you see that stuff, you're kind of more laughing at it, or kind of it's almost like gleeful, like, oh, look, how are they going to pull this crazy stuff off? What are they going to do here to like try to shock me? And it's more of a fun aspect of those movies. Now if you take like a more in the 2000s, like when all the torture porn kind of stuff was big, like, that's not always fun. Like I think there's certain directors that could pull it off, like Eli Roth with the Hostel movies, because there's the kind of a goofy tone to those movies too, and some comedy in there, so I think it helps. But yeah, some of that stuff might just be there to like make you sick, I guess. I don't know. But I think a lot of times people, when you're watching like a slasher film or anything like that, if you're a horror fan, you're probably laughing more than you are recoiling, just enjoying the experience. So I think like within comics and movies, that could be something, though I use violence and all that in a different way with my comics. I don't like focusing on it. It's a one or two panel thing. I'm not going to have 5 panels of like just something disgusting. It's going to be like a flash, because violence to me is like sudden and serious. Just depends on the comic though. Like The Goblet at the Black Oak has more of a fun tone to it, so anything in there is going to be more fun to read. The Long Death is a more serious feel to it, more of a dark fantasy. You're going to look at the violence differently, but I would say that's an aspect that is probably misunderstood a lot of times, that it's not always there to shock, but it's sometimes there to either say something or just have fun with it.
Yeah, I'm not much of a horror, like gore person. Like I like the
Right.
psychological side of things, which is ironic because I failed psychology. But I think that when it comes to comics and when it comes to horror films, like I enjoyed Saw 2 because I saw that in theater just by happenstance, and I enjoyed the psychological aspect of that more so than all the traps and all that other stuff. It was just, if you can do good psychology and really get you on the edge of your seat and trying to figure out, is this character good or not, or is this really a bad guy? Like, what are the motivations? I think that really kind of sets your project or comic or film apart from, say, the torture porn of horror like you were talking about in the early 2000s.
I agree. I agree. Suspense is so important,
Mm.
and I think it's something that's actually missing a lot from a lot of movies these days. But like, when I think of that, I think of the movie Hereditary, which had some grueling stuff in there, but the movie had me like kind of just holding my seat, like the arms on my seat the whole time because it was building to that stuff. It just didn't, it wasn't happening the entire time. It was like there was all these like things happening that you didn't quite understand, and it was all coming together. And once it did, then it just got bonkers. And like, but it was okay at that point because it was the big release, and it was just time to go completely nuts in that movie. So I think that's a good example of like suspense, but then also some more grueling stuff happening towards the end.
What is your pitch about this particular comic, and why should people not only support the campaign but read the comic?
I'd say that The Long Death is like Hansel and Gretel meets the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's just like got some ideas from that fairy tale, but it's just the basics, before it gets into other stuff. When I say Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I mean that, it's like the setting, it might be a little bloodier than the fairy tale. Essentially, what The Long Death is, it's a gothic fairy tale. It's about a boy and a girl, Victor and Iris, who are escaping. Their town has been devastated by a plague. So they decide to go to West Arkansashire. That's where Iris's aunt lives. But on their way there, obviously they're very hungry. They haven't eaten in days, and they end up at this farmhouse that's inhabited by the butcher and the old crone. From there, they're captured, and will they be able to escape? Going to be a nice clean escape, or are they going to have to take revenge on their captors? There's aspects of this that story-wise, I think that people will latch on to some of the themes within it. Definitely the art is beautiful. It's by Anna Wieszczyk. She's out of Poland, and she just crafted such a beautiful graphic novel. Every page is just something you could stare at. He adds a lot to the story within the atmosphere of it, making like this dreamlike quality while you're reading it. It just flows really nicely. It's 80 pages, so it's not like a heavy read, a little more in depth because of that. She just makes it flow so well. I think it's a beautiful graphic novel, and I just hope more people get on board with it.
That was the one thing I noticed about the artwork of it. Looking at the art itself, though, it looked like a lot of watercolor, it looked like hard, dark shadows when needed. It was very stylistic in that approach, gouache in certain aspects. I think that the color choices and the tone just really fit. It wasn't like a traditional black and white comic.
The cool thing about Anna, we were supposed to work together years ago on my graphic novel, Getting Back to Normal. I think she works a lot. We couldn't work it out. I started looking at her work more and following her on social media, loving what she was doing. So this book was actually partly inspired by her art, and I just had to hope that she signed on to it once the script was finished and I presented it to her. Because like I didn't like say, hey, can we work together on this book? That I just wrote the whole thing and then brought it to her. Luckily, she said yes, because this was written for her art. She was the perfect person to do it.
You've worked with Michelle Lodge for many of your comics. You're now working with Anna here with this particular project. But what is it about Michelle's art and Anna's art that just makes them the perfect artists for whatever you write?
Michelle, she just recently did her own comic called Fantastic Freaks. It's like its own little world. It's like got monsters in it and everything. So she has this like good ability to do kind of a more cartoony, fun style, but then also the very serious black and white noir style of Home Free. But that's what we do together. We've done the Black Wall together, which has never been put out in print. There's only digital versions of it out there, Home Free, and now we're going to embark on something next year. What we do together is like this more realistic noir stories that take place in modern times, and she just does that beautifully. She just captures that tone with the way she does her black and white art with also like the grays and everything. That's just perfect. But Anna herself, I was inspired by her art because she just makes this, it just feels otherworldly, and it just brings this fantasy quality to it. Is just perfect for this gothic fairy tale setting. in the world that we created. This does not take place in modern times. It takes place in, an older time. I like to kind of leave my world a little loose because all my forgotten folklore will be written in this same sort of time period. I want to make it kind of beyond time. It's just like its own place that doesn't really exist, doesn't really go by our rules, but it's familiar to us. Like when you watch like the old Universal horror movies or Hammer horror films, it's like, yeah, that's England, or that's supposed to be maybe Germany or something at a certain time period, but they feel very much like their own worlds. And that's what I want to create with this. And Anna really helped with this comic and making this its very own world. I just feel like her art is very special, and throughout the years she's just going to get bigger and bigger as more and more people latch onto her work.
Talk about Forgotten Horror. Is it a collection of stories you're putting together, or what is that about?
Forgotten Folklore it's going to be all standalone stories. Kind of started, I used to have a website called Ham-Fisted Tales. That title did not really work for what I was doing, but I wanted it to sound like an EC Comics kind of a thing. That's where I wrote The Goblet at that Black Oak. This other one that's unreleased is probably just going to remain digital, called Upon the Judge's Order, which was like this tribute to Vincent Price in this movie called Witchfinder General, where I try to make my own story, kind of similar in veins to that. They basically take place in an older time, in a world that we don't really know but looks familiar. It's like a time period in a world where devils and men walk the earth together. Monsters exist. It's not unusual to find spirits or witches or goblins, but it's also not like people are looking for them. It's going to be like my own Hammer film series or my own Universal Monsters thing. And there are going to be stories of revenge, Muppets, stories where maybe the main character, you may like them, but they might not always win, There are going to be standalone graphic novels, shorter in nature, maybe 60 to maybe 100 pages at the most. This is what I want to do with my horror. I want to keep it in this world and keep on making them. So that's the importance of the Long Death campaign and success with this, because this is my first real release with it. I hope to continue this series for as long as I can, because for a long time I didn't know how I wanted to write horror. Once I found this style, a friend of mine that I used to do comics with, Tobias, created this character called the Bavarian Hammer, and then we came up with this series called Tales of Hammer Fist, and it took place in like this older Germany. It was kind of the precursor to all this stuff I'm doing now, but it was like really goofy and crazy. I was more like of a fun comic, a fun fantasy thing, but it inspired me like, oh man, I really like writing stuff in this world and creating my own folklore and creating my own creatures. So after doing that, I really found my place, and I was like, I know how I want to do my horror, and this is the world I want to live with it.
Who's the team around, of course, this particular series? What's everyone's roles, and how did you find everyone?
Anna, I don't even know where we met. It must have been in some forum. This story I wrote, I think I started writing this in 2018. This has been a project that is a long time coming, because I stopped it for a while after I wrote the script. The creation process can take a long time, I looked through her stuff and just loved it. But Eduardo, I'm going to be honest, I don't even know where I met Eduardo, but at this point he has lettered. This must be the 5th time we worked together, and I'm just comfortable working with him. He's really professional. I like his lettering. He adapts his lettering and his bubble style and all that captions to the work and makes it really fit. And I think his lettering on The Long Death is really fantastic. Coming to me with different styles, and we figured out together what ultimately everything's going to look like with the word balloons and the way the text is going to look, and even just like the lines coming out of the word balloons. Sometimes if you make them a little thinner, a little squiggly or something, it just works better for like the tone of the comic. So yeah, Eduardo's somebody I will probably working with until he gets sick of working with me, I guess,
How do you think The Long Death fits into the broader genre of horror comics?
I feel like, like I take classic story elements. We talked about EC Comics. It's always been a huge inspiration for me. And like taking that shorter story, Tales of Revenge and whatnot, and expanding it into like a graphic novel, man, I feel like, there's not a lot of comics like it right now, the style that it's really grasping onto. I feel like it's going to feel very fresh for people who read it. This is just a standalone graphic novel. It's not something you're going to see again with these characters. I feel like people will be able to dig into them.
I think you have some really good points. I agree. Yes, the comic itself is definitely unique compared to other horror comics that are out there. You're not taking a traditional black and white approach. You have a very talented artist and colorist when it comes to the creation of your series itself. Mm-hmm. And this is just one story of many that you're going to keep making. You have solid lettering, who's worked with you in the past, who's modified the style to fit the horror genre. So every aspect from your team to your comic to your story, while having inspirations, is still unique in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I guess the way it's going to fit into horror, I think there is a uniqueness to the story and the way it's told, and I think it's very memorable. Not just the art, but the writing, where this story goes, it flows a little differently plot wise, not strict, I guess. It just like goes through this moment. It's just days of these children's lives where there's a huge change, that there's just forces around them, and just basically the horrific reaction ending that comes to everything. But it should feel meaningful too, at the end of it. I feel like this is a story that really wraps up at the end of it. People are just going to feel that there was like some deep meaning to it, and it's going to come out in the beauty of the art, and like I said, almost like dreamlike storytelling of it and the way it flows.
Yeah, speaking of the forces at work in your comics series itself, can you tell us about the process of developing the characters of Iris and Victor, who we're following in the story, and Old Crone and the Butcher?
We talked a little bit about it. Like I was inspired by this movie, The Night of the Hunter. It is an inspiration I almost forgot about. It was like I wrote this years ago, and that movie, I wanted to kind of emulate the fact that movie is from the perspective of the children, as Robert Mitchum, this preacher character, is after them. It's always considered a film noir, but it's very much a horror movie as well. He comes off very terrifying and imposing, and I wanted the world to be very terrifying and imposing to Iris and Victor. So that's the POV I was going from with the children. The children themselves, Victor, he's a bit of the weaker one. He needs Iris. She's the stronger character. He latches onto her immediately. As basically the story starts, Victor's father is dying, just sitting out the window, just looking out to the empty streets of his plague-ridden town, and she's walking by, and he knows exactly who she is because she's the girl that sings at church. She's got a beautiful voice, sung at all these funerals that have been happening. So Victor latches onto her. He sees strength in her, so he grabs her right away. This is where their story starts together. She has those instincts. She's not going to just leave him behind. The world's empty for her too. Even though she's strong enough to go on her own, she's willing to bring him with her. So Iris is the strength. Victor has to find that strength. And all the other characters in the story are all adults, and I don't give them names. The butcher is the butcher. The old crone is the old crone. The archer, that's his name, and everyone else that's involved. Really wanted them. No adult character is going to be respectful enough to these children to even introduce themselves. They're just going to be these imposing forces in their lives. So the adult characters, they feel fully developed, but there is like an aspect of them that lives out exactly what their names are. Like the archer is a strong character, can take care of himself. It's something you would think of when you think of an archer. You never know who he is exactly, but you kind of do without him having to say it. And that's what I wanted to get across with the adults. Maybe it's a little bit of like how we all grow up and we start just fitting into our roles in life. I've been doing phlebotomy for years, so maybe there's a lot of people out there. I'm just the phlebotomist. Yeah, that's kind of where these people fit in together.
That also drives the point home, because you're looking at this from a child's perspective. They're seeing these adults, but the fact that while these adults are labeled based on their particular roles in life, it also touches on corruption as well, because you're looking at adults taking advantage of kids, or kids trying to complete their goal and their task, but there's always a roadblock of some kind. Can you elaborate on the fact that you have corruption in the adult world and how these children are dealing with it?
Our roles as adults, we see it all the time. I mean, there's corrupt individuals all around us, and you mostly see it when it's really kind of popularized in media or something. It's not necessarily that your boss or your coworker or your friend, but you might hear stories like of things that they've done to get revenge on people, or there might be small things like starting rumors or just talking about somebody. And it's just like those things grow at a point in society where they can be out of control. That comes with power also. So there's a power dynamic in this that, obviously, especially back then, people are going to take children less seriously. Probably don't take them that serious now. These two children might represent most of us in ways, because there's always somebody out there beyond our scope that's taking advantage of us. And this story kind of goes into that a little bit. Like, the butcher and the old crone are kind of the surface, but there's a part of this society that's right beyond them that we get to know that's really controlling what's going on. That's where the corruption kind of starts.
You also mentioned vengeance as well, and that seems to be a common theme in horror in some way, shape, or form, whether it's the main characters that want vengeance upon whoever their attacker is, or whether it's the villain itself getting vengeance upon whoever that may be. Can you discuss the spirit of vengeance when it comes to the Long Death here? Like, how does that come into play as a theme in your story?
Well, if you take vengeance, it's not like something that happens in real life often. I'm sure there's stories out there, when there's victims involved, or most people will get that if the person gets caught and goes to court, gets put in prison or something, but some people don't get that. And I feel like stories in horror where people really get to, lay down the law on whatever's stalking them or after them, or they just get to take care of the situation themselves. Those stories resonate with us because we want to be able to do that. I feel like it's a motivating force almost. Like, you want to be able to take care of yourself and take care of whatever comes at you. It's just something that when you see in a movie, it's going to feel good. It might feel sad also, because the length that somebody has to go to isn't necessarily a good thing for that person or their spirit, how they feel. It's going to be a destructive force in their life too, because that's like a traumatic event that they're going to have to live with for the rest of their life, So there's so many levels to vengeance. It's not just an easy, like, oh, that person did this to me, I'm going to go take care of the situation. There's like a lasting effect to having to get to that point and having to take vengeance that I think that can really harm a person's character. So I feel like this story looks at that aspect of it, not just like Uma Thurman going to kill Bill, which, I mean, there's lots of levels to that. I'm not saying that's just, but on the surface, that's what you're seeing, right? I think in this comic, I feel like I can't get too deep into the vengeance aspect of it because it really, where the story starts taking different turns. It's not just a simple tale of just killing the bad guys, or whatever. I think there's a lasting impact to what happens in this story.
Does that dive into the challenges you had to face when you're trying to craft this particular story when it came to these child protagonists? Is there something that you didn't want to touch on, or it would have just completely changed what you were trying to write?
I think that those themes of powers greater than you, kind of controlling your life a little bit, or making decisions against your will, or whatever it is, I think that's always the theme in my stories. My stories are almost always about the individual kind of getting pushed down by like an authoritarian sort of force and having to deal with that, how they deal with it. It's not always tales of revenge, but sometimes my characters win, sometimes they lose. You never know what you're going to get in one of my stories when it comes to that aspect. So it's just something that's resonated with me all my life, and it's like a theme that carries on throughout my stories. But yeah, like, as a creator, those challenges are always there, especially in the Kickstarter age. Like, it's a great aspect that you get to finally really put your stuff out there and actually make it happen a lot easier than, trying to come up with all that money yourself back in the day, if you're going to do this by yourself. But it's the Kickstarter is the whole other challenge. Really, it's a mental challenge, I think, more than anything, because there's so many emotions going on throughout the process. So that's always probably going to inspire, something out of what I write.
Money is a motivator in some cases, and that also is very helpful. Let's dive quickly into the Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah, I guess like if we go to the covers first, it might be the best place to start.
And you have some really great pages here too. Like, you can see the beautiful artwork of Anna.
Yeah, I try to give a variety of the different scenes within the comic just so you can kind of really see the scope of the art. So the first cover, the standard cover, is done by Anna. And I really like it because it really, I think, encapsulates the comic with the two children surrounded by like thorns and trees and branches. Just this walking into the woods, into a world that we can't really see beyond. And I feel like that cover really covers that really well.
Covers.
Yeah, I just realized I did that. And the next cover is the first variant. This one is done by an artist known as the Creep from 6 Feet Deep. Tyler Pennington's his actual name. And he's amazing. This guy does art all day long because he's just always posting new stuff. He's a tattoo artist in his like day job. He just has this kind of just that classic horror, like Bernie Wrightson type vibe to him. And his artwork is amazing. And it was like a kind of a dream to work with him. So I was so happy that he said yes. It's always intimidating to ask artists because you're scared that they're going to say no. This cover is kind of like a little more of like a grueling kind of cover because the butcher is at work. And you kind of get an aspect of what he and the old Crone do. He's chopping up a leg there. So but I think this is a wonderful cover. He did a really great job on it.
I love the hatching and the line work that he's done in there too. It looks amazing and beautiful. Like I could see that as a poster.
Yeah, no, he's that's what he does. Check out his work on Instagram. That's the place to follow him. You'll be amazed every day he posts something. Then the last cover is actually done by Michelle Lodge. This one I just released yesterday. It's going to be limited to 25 copies. It's available in 2 different tiers, and there's 5 add-ons available. She's going to sign all of them. So a rare piece of work, guys. 25 copies, all signed by Michelle. You can only get them probably on this campaign.
This is a hardcover book, isn't it? We didn't even touch on that.
Yeah, it's soft cover and hardcover available. Michelle's cover I like too because it almost brings out that fairy tale aspect to it a little more, the dark fairy tale. It's really nice work she did. So in the tiers, have the digital version. Then the deluxe digital comes with a digital copy of my other comic, The Goblet at the Black Oak. So for $20, you get 2 full comics. One's 80 pages, one's 52 pages. Then you're going to get a bunch of extra content with that. All the covers, everything that, art from the comic, character design, and I'll probably have the script in there as well. So, there's the basic hardcover, softcover versions. Then there's the Forgotten Folklore package. This is where you get the print version of the Goblet at Black Oak with the Long Death and also a Forgotten Folklore sticker, the digital copies as well. The Devil's Little Sister print package, we teamed up with an Instagram model that goes by the moniker The Devil's Little Sister. She's does all like gothic modeling. And we thought it'd be cool to team up with her and do a print of her that's available on the campaign with everything in the Forgotten Folklore package, but also the sticker that comes with her package is like a glitter version. So it's got a cool little glitter on the skull and the smoke and the logo. But Michelle actually did the print for this. She did a fantastic job. Michelle did a playing card deck called Bad Witch a couple years ago, and she did it in that style. It was just kind of vintage pinup style, but this is a little different. I also have a tier that I just opened up where you can get that print as well as Michelle's cover, and the print and the cover will be signed by Michelle. Then the die cut Halloween decorations package. This one is Tobias, my friend, he's the first person I ever made comics with back in like 2006. I always bring him on for stuff on different campaigns. He's actually a tattoo artist up in Seattle right now. We made die-cut Halloween decorations. I love old vintage Halloween stuff. These are the kind you would just put on your wall. They're in the shape of the characters. After we looked at the campaign, I can actually show you my proof copies. They're really cool. Tobias did it in his style, but they're perfect for your walls at Halloween. The retail package, we all know what that is. That's just like, hey, retailers, buy this at a cheaper deal with free shipping. Then the Forgotten Folklore bundle, that's just a little bit of everything. Where you're getting the Long Death, Goblet at the Black Oak, you're getting the digital versions, you're getting the die-cut Halloween decorations, you're getting the sticker. I have a Forgotten Folklore button, and I'm making a glow-in-the-dark metal bookmark that's available with that as well. And then the last main tier is the Coffee Time Comics bundle, in which you get every single thing I've ever released in print, and the 2 current comics in digital. So you're getting the Long Death, Goblet, Getting Back to Normal, all 5 issues of the Home Free series, and the 3 crime novellas I've written for that series as well. So you can see the actual pictures of Stephanie, the model for that. But the cool thing about this print is it's not only it's a 11 by 7. It's going to be on heavy cardstock, so it's real quality. But if you can see, all the red is foil stamped, so it has like a shine to it. It looks really cool. I hope more people jump on this tier because it's a really, really nice print that Michelle did. And then I have the die cut. That's the old Crone done in Tobias's style. This is the Butcher. And then we have the Archer fighting off an army of spirits.
Nice.
So pretty cool little things. I just wanted to try some different stuff with this, so it wasn't just the running, the usual bookmarks, stickers, and buttons. I wanted to try something really different with this campaign.
It's good because you give them a good variety. I mean, it won't scare the kids if they decide to pick it up, or if the parents decide to pick it up, or whatever. But at least you're giving something for everyone. I think that's really good to see, especially for what you've created here. What do you hope readers will take away from The Long Death after finishing it?
I hope it's something like a comic that they can just curl up on the couch with under a blanket on like a cold winter day and read and just feel, even though there's some sadness to it or some horror to it, at the end of it, I want them to feel the warmth of that fire, that blanket that's lighting up the room. And I want the comic to be able to do that for them as well. Perfect for that kind of read, just by yourself in a low-lit room and, just diving into a world that you've never seen before or that feels familiar but different and new. I think that folks who buy this will just really enjoy the comic. I've had quite a few different creators read it. They've given me some nice quotes on the page, and that everyone seems to really enjoy and understand what I was going for with this.
Well, John, I do hate to say it, but that ends this particular episode of Two Geeks Talking. I want to thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be on here with you.
Before I let you go, where can we find you? How can we support you? Of course, where is this Kickstarter campaign, and when does it end?
So it ends on November 27th. And obviously, if you type The Long Death into Kickstarter, it's going to pop up under the graphic novels comics category. Or you can always follow the link, thelongdeath.coffeetimecomics.com. And that's comics with an IX at the end. That'll be an easy way just to go right to the campaign. Otherwise, if you just go to coffeetimecomics.com, I have a link on there to my Kickstarter. And if you find me on social media at coffeetimecomics on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, I'm obviously posting a lot about it there, so you'll easily find the campaign.
Like I said, that ends this particular episode. You can, of course, find this interview and 1,200 plus others on our website, tgtmedia.com or twogeekstalking.com. That's TWO. Of course, the website's going through complete rebuild. I'm only one person. Give me a break. Go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TGTmedia. The podcast you can find at twogeekstalking.podbean.com or just search Two Geeks Talking wherever you get your podcasts. And as I say every week, everyone has a story to tell. It's up to me to help bring that out. Thanks for listening and watching on Two Geeks Talking.